Walk down any major city street in America, look down at the sidewalk. You'll see them. Windows, glass panes at ankle level, half buried beneath concrete and asphalt, looking down into rooms that were never meant to be underground. They're in Chicago, New York, Boston, San Francisco, Seattle, Denver, Philadelphia, Montreal, Savannah. Not hidden, not secret, just there. Thousands of them in every older city district across North America and Europe. And once you notice them, you can't stop seeing them. I first spotted them in Chicago, walking through the Loop on a research trip. There they were, ornate window frames jutting from the sidewalk, iron grates covering decorative glass, clearly designed to let light into rooms below. The official explanation makes sense at first. Old basement apartments, coal chutes, access to utilities, cities built in layers. But then I saw the same pattern in Seattle, the same depth, the same architectural style, the same decorative details, arched tops, ornamental ironwork, masonry that matched the buildings above, not rough basement construction, finished architecture, meant to be seen, meant to be admired. And that's when I started asking questions. Let me show you what I found. Not speculation, not theory, just what's documented. What you can verify yourself. The physical evidence is undeniable. These windows exist. You can go look at them right now. The question is, what are we looking at? Chicago's story is well documented. Between 1855 and 1865, the entire downtown was raised 4 to 14 feet. The official explanation? Drainage and sewage. Chicago sat barely above Lake Michigan. Streets were mud, standing water everywhere. Cholera outbreaks killed thousands. In 1854, 6% of the city's population died from disease caused by standing water and inadequate drainage. The crisis forced action. In 1855, the city council voted to raise the street grade. And here's where it gets remarkable. They didn't demolish and rebuild. They literally lifted existing buildings, some weighing thousands of tons, on jack screws while the streets were filled in beneath them. This is documented extensively. Newspaper accounts from the Chicago Tribune describe crowds of thousands gathering to watch entire 4-story brick buildings rise into the air at 12 inches per day. The first masonry building was raised in January 1858. A 4-story, 750-ton brick structure at Randolph and Dearborn, lifted 6 feet 2 inches on 200 jack screws without the slightest injury to the building. People shopped in stores while they were being lifted. Hotels operated normally while floating on 6,000 jack screws. Guests checked in and out. Bars remained open. Business continued as if nothing unusual was happening. One hotel patron noted in his diary that the front steps got steeper every day. When he checked out a week later, the windows were 6 feet higher than when he arrived. The Tremont House, a massive hotel weighing 27,000 tons, was raised 27.5 inches in 1865 without a single crack. 600 men operated 6,000 jack screws simultaneously. The entire operation took 5 days. Visitors were invited to walk through the forest of iron screws on the final day. The engineering was extraordinary, mathematically precise, coordinated across hundreds of workers, using technology that still impresses modern engineers. This actually happened. The documentation is extensive. Photographs exist, engineering records exist, cost estimates exist. But here's what bothers me. Not every building was raised. Some building owners couldn't afford the $15,000 to $20,000 cost, about $500,000 in modern currency. So they did something else. They moved their businesses to the second floor, created new entrances at the new street level using exterior staircases, and used the original first floor as basement storage. Which means today, in neighborhoods like Pilsen and heart of Chicago, you can still see those original first-floor windows, complete with decorative details, display window designs, architectural ornamentation meant to attract customers, now sitting at sidewalk level. Looking down into what were once storefronts. The windows have ornate frames, decorative lintels, careful masonry work. Not basement windows, not utility access. Street-level commercial architecture, designed to be seen and admired by pedestrians. Now underground. This is where the official story makes perfect sense. Streets raised for documented public health reasons. Extraordinary engineering accomplished the work. Some buildings lifted, others adapted by using first floors as basements. Simple urban planning, documented, photographed, verified. Except the same thing happened in Seattle, at the exact same time, using different engineering methods for the same official reasons. Seattle's story is also documented, extensively. You can tour the evidence today. On June 6, 1889 at 2:20 p.m., a glue pot overturned in a carpentry shop. Within hours, fire destroyed 66 blocks of downtown Seattle. 25 blocks of the central business district completely gone. But Seattle's economy was strong. Rebuilding began immediately. Within days, city leaders held a public meeting to discuss reconstruction. And during that meeting, they made a decision. Raise the street level. Pioneer Square had been built on tidelands, flooded constantly. The crude wooden box sewers backed up at high tide. Residents couldn't flush toilets during high tide without sewage geysers 6 feet high blasting back through their bathrooms. Newspapers printed daily tidal charts so people would know when it was safe to use the bathroom. The city decided to fix it, raise streets 12 to 30 feet, build proper sewers underneath, end the flooding problem permanently. But here's the problem. Property owners couldn't wait years for regrading. They had businesses to rebuild, loans to repay. The economic boom from Alaska, gold prospecting meant enormous potential profits. So they rebuilt immediately, using the new ordinance requiring brick and stone construction instead of wood, building on the old, low, muddy ground where they'd been before. Meanwhile, starting in 1890, the city began raising streets. They built retaining walls on either side of existing streets, then used water sluices to wash dirt from the steep hillsides into the space between the walls. Gradually, over several years, the streets rose, 12 feet in some areas, nearly 30 feet in others, which created a bizarre situation. Businesses operating at ground level suddenly found themselves 1 to 2 stories below the new street. Oh, for years, from about 1890 to 1907, people used ladders to climb down from the new elevated streets to shop in the old storefronts below. 33 city blocks had 2 tiers of sidewalks, the world's first subterranean shopping mall, created entirely by accident. Stairways at major intersections allowed access between levels. Most people actually preferred shopping at the lower level. It was quieter, cleaner, safer from traffic, and protected from rain. But it was also dangerous. At least 19 pedestrians died falling from the elevated streets to the old sidewalks below, or being crushed by objects falling from the new street level. Eventually, from 1892 to 1900, new sidewalks were built at the elevated street level. Vault lights, thick glass blocks, were embedded in the new sidewalks to allow some light into the passages below. Building owners moved their businesses to what was now the second floor, created new entrances at the new street level, and the original ground floor became Seattle's underground. In 1907, the city condemned the underground after 3 people died from bubonic plague linked to rat infestation. It was closed to the public. The underground passages sat forgotten for decades, used for illegal speakeasies during Prohibition, flophouses for the homeless, gambling halls, storage, slowly deteriorating, until 1965 when local historian Bill Speidel started giving tours, and people saw for themselves what existed beneath Seattle's streets. Original 1890s storefronts, complete with display windows designed to showcase merchandise, ornate Victorian facades with decorative brickwork, hotel lobbies with carved wood details, bank teller cages, elaborate architectural elements, all designed to be seen at street level, all carefully crafted to impress and attract customers walking past, all now underground, buried beneath modern sidewalks with vault lights where once they had open sky. You can tour it today, 3 blocks of the original 1890s city. The architecture speaks for itself. This wasn't rough basement construction. These were finished commercial spaces, street-level businesses, ground floor showrooms, now 12 to 30 feet underground. Again, the official story makes sense and is well documented. Fire in 1889 provided opportunity for infrastructure improvement. Streets raised for sewage and flood control. Businesses rebuilt too quickly and ended up below street level, eventually covered over when new sidewalks were built. Logical, documented, verified. But here's what I can't reconcile. The same pattern appears in Boston, same time frame, same depth. Streets raised for sewage infrastructure in the 1850s to 1870s. New York, same pattern. Lower Manhattan shows clear evidence of raised streets. Original ground floors, now basements. San Francisco. Streets regraded multiple times between 1850 to 1915. Entire neighborhoods excavated and refilled. Philadelphia, Denver, Savannah, Montreal. All during the same 50-year period, 1850 to 1900. All with the same official explanation. Sewers, drainage, public health, infrastructure modernization. All showing the same architectural evidence. Ornate first-floor windows now at sidewalk level. Decorative elements designed to be seen from street level now underground. And not just American cities, the pattern is global. Or Edinburgh's underground city isn't underground at all. It's the original street level, buried when they built the South Bridge in the 1780s. You can tour Mary King's Close today, doorways, windows, complete rooms that once saw daylight, all buried. Rome's Basilica di San Clemente sits on top of 2 earlier churches. Descend through the layers and you find complete architectural spaces, frescoes, altars, finished rooms, all deliberately buried and built over. St. Petersburg. Ground floors became basements, original entrances now underground. Paris, Prague, Budapest, Vienna, Madrid, Istanbul. Old cities across Europe and Asia showing the same evidence. Original ground floors buried, streets elevated, windows that opened to sunlight now opening to soil and stone, all the same depth, all with the same precision, all during roughly the same historical period. Here's what we can prove. What's documented beyond dispute. These buried levels exist. You can visit them, tour them, photograph them. They're not hidden, not secret, just there. The architecture is sophisticated, ornate cornices, granite lintels, precisely cut keystones, decorative brackets and ironwork, not utility construction, not rough basement work. Finished architecture meant to be experienced at street level. The timing is consistent across multiple continents. Cities with no cultural contact, no shared engineering tradition, no coordinated urban planning, all showing evidence of street raising during the same 50-year window, 1850 to 1900. The official explanation is also documented. Cities did raise streets for sewage and drainage. Chicago's building lifting is well recorded. Seattle's regrading is extensively photographed. This happened. So what's the question? The question is scale and coordination and timing. Why did this happen in every major city during the same brief historical period? The official answer is simple. The Industrial Revolution. Cities industrialized. Populations exploded. Existing infrastructure couldn't handle it. They needed sewers. They needed drainage. They raised streets to install modern utilities. This makes sense. It's logical. It's documented. But walk through an untouched medieval village in England, one that never industrialized, never modernized. You'll find original ground floors still at ground level, buildings from the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s. No burial, no accumulation. Streets at their original elevation. Why? Because without deliberate raising, streets don't bury themselves. Not uniformly, not precisely, not globally. The official explanation says gradual accumulation, centuries of debris, construction materials, organic matter, slowly raising street levels. But the evidence doesn't show gradual accumulation. It shows clean burial. Windows still framed, still glassed, still architecturally complete, just suddenly underground. Not water damage, not slow erosion, not decades of buildup. Clean burial. As if something deposited meters of material rapidly enough that cities built over it rather than excavating. I'm not claiming to know what that something was. I'm showing you what's documented. And here's what keeps me searching for better answers. We have almost no photographic evidence of the transition. Photography became widespread in the 1850s to 1870s. By then, the buried windows were already there. The streets were already elevated. The underground levels were already underground. We have images of Chicago's buildings being lifted on jack screws. We have images of Seattle's street raising in progress. We have documentation of the engineering projects. But we have almost no images of workers filling in original ground floors, no photographs of the burial process itself, no documentation of how the original street-level architecture ended up meters underground. The photographs from the 1850s onward show streets already at their elevated positions, the underground levels already buried. Why is there no photographic record of the transition? The standard answer is that photography was new, expensive, not widely used for construction documentation. But we have extensive photographic records of other 19th century construction projects, bridges, railways, buildings, cities being built. Why not extensive documentation of the most dramatic urban engineering project of the century, the systematic raising of dozens of major cities? Let me be very clear about what I'm claiming and what I'm not claiming. I'm not claiming the official explanation is wrong. Streets were raised for sewers. This is documented. The engineering projects happened. I'm not claiming some hidden, force-buried cities overnight. I'm not suggesting supernatural explanations. What I'm asking is, does the official story fully explain what we're seeing? Because here's what bothers me about the timeline. Maps from the 1700s and early 1800s show Tartary, or Tartaria, as a vast region spanning much of Asia. Some maps label it Great Tartary. Others subdivide it, Chinese Tartary, Muscovite Tartary, Independent Tartary. It's there on maps from major cartographers. Documented, not disputed. Then suddenly it disappears, not conquered, not absorbed into other nations. Simply removed from maps, removed from history books, removed from collective memory. When does it disappear? Roughly 1850 to 1900, the exact same 50-year period when cities globally raised their streets and buried their original ground floors, the exact same period when old architecture was demolished and replaced with modern industrial designs, the exact same period when asylums proliferated, locking away people who claim to remember things differently. Is this coincidence or pattern? I can't prove it's pattern. The timing correlation doesn't prove causation. Well, maps change for many reasons. Urban infrastructure projects happen for documented reasons, but the timing is remarkable, and the global coordination is hard to explain by independent development. If Chicago needed to raise streets for sewage, that makes sense. Local problem, local solution. But why did dozens of cities worldwide, cities with different climates, different geographies, different drainage needs, all determine they needed to raise streets during the same 50 years? Some had flooding problems, some didn't. Some were coastal, some were inland, some had sewage issues, some had adequate drainage. Yet all of them raised streets, all buried original ground floors, all during the same historical window. The official explanation is industrialization, modernization, progress. Cities needed modern infrastructure. They adapted. And I'm not disputing that. It's documented. It happened. What I'm questioning is whether that fully explains the pattern, the timing, the global coordination, because cities don't usually coordinate that precisely. Infrastructure projects don't usually happen simultaneously across continents without communication, unless they were responding to the same event, the same need, the same something. What that something was, I don't know. Maybe it was purely economic. Industrialization drove simultaneous urbanization worldwide. Maybe it was purely practical. Cities hit a threshold where old infrastructure couldn't support growth. Or maybe something else happened. Something that required burying the old and building new. Something that changed street levels globally. Something that we're supposed to remember as gradual urban evolution rather than rapid transformation. I'm not claiming to know. I'm showing you the evidence and asking you to think about it, because the evidence is there. You can see it, you can verify it, you can walk any older city and find those windows, those buried doorways, those underground rooms that were never designed to be underground. The official explanation exists, well documented, reasonable, logical. The timeline correlation exists, also documented, also verifiable. Which interpretation makes more sense is up to you, but I'll tell you what convinced me to keep investigating. I walked through Seattle's underground, stood in a storefront that operated in the 1890s, looking at display windows designed to showcase merchandise to passersby on the street. Those windows were 12 feet underground, beneath modern sidewalks, buried when the city was raised. The tour guide explained it all. Fire in 1889. Decision to raise streets, businesses rebuilt too quickly. Ended up underground, all very logical. But looking at those windows, ornate Victorian designs, careful craftsmanship, positioned for maximum street visibility, I couldn't shake one question. Why build them so carefully if they were going to be buried? The standard answer is they weren't going to be buried. They were built at ground level. The burial came later, unexpectedly, when the city raised streets. But the same pattern appears in cities that didn't have fires, that didn't have documented raising projects, that show no historical record of deliberate street elevation. Yet somehow, their original ground floors ended up underground too. How? The official answer is gradual accumulation. Natural urban evolution happens everywhere, but it doesn't happen everywhere. Only in cities that underwent major transformations during that specific 50-year window. Medieval villages that never industrialized? Original ground floors still at ground level. Cities that modernized after 1900? No buried levels. Streets at original elevations? Only cities that transformed during 1850 to 1900 show this pattern. Why that specific window? I don't have a definitive answer. Nobody does. The official explanation is industrialization, and maybe that's sufficient. But the correlation with Tartaria's disappearance bothers me. The global timing bothers me. The lack of photographic evidence for the transition bothers me. And most of all, the windows themselves bother me, because they're beautiful, carefully designed, meant to be seen, meant to catch light, meant to display goods to people walking past at street level. They weren't designed for basements. They weren't designed to be buried. Yet there they are, thousands of them, in every old city, at exactly the same depth below modern streets. Make your own conclusions. Look at the evidence yourself, walk your city, find those windows, ask yourself what you're seeing. Is it exactly what the official explanation says? Logical urban planning, documented engineering projects, natural city evolution? Or is it evidence of something else? Something that happened during a specific historical period? Something that required burying the old world and building a new one on top? I'm not telling you what to think. I'm showing you what's there. The windows are there, the documentation is there, the timeline is there, the interpretation is yours. But whatever explanation you choose, you have to account for the evidence. The physical, visible, undeniable evidence sitting right there at sidewalk level in cities worldwide. Those windows weren't designed to be underground, yet underground they are. Why?